I'm here today with Neal Schaffer, who's joining us for this interview. I'm going to run through a few quick questions, understand a little bit about his background, what it is he's been up to. So first of all, Neal, thanks very much for joining me.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor.
No worries. So maybe just to start off with, could you kind of give everyone a bit of a summary of what it is you do?
So I am a marketing consultant, author, speaker. Written a few books on marketing, specifically on the area of social media marketing. My next book, called The Age of Influence, will be all about, I believe, the influencer marketing playbook that has not existed yet. So I'm excited about the release of that. I consult with companies large and small. I also actually teach digital marketing to executives at Rutgers Business School in the United States, as well as the Irish Management Institute. I fly out to Dublin every year for that. And I have a blog. I have a number of collaborators just trying to publish content and really help move the industry forward. So I consider myself an educator at heart, but when clients need help, from the consulting to the training to the implementation, I want to be there to provide it. And I've actually created an agency to help them do that as well.
Yeah, it's a great way to learn as well, isn't it? Getting the practical insights on the ground as well from kind of doing that agency work. I always find I learn a lot that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, you sort of have to do the agency work in order to have content to teach about, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're not doing, if you're not doing activities that, if you're not engaging with lots of executives in finding out what their pain points are, you don't know what to bring back to the table from the agency side as well. So it all sort of works together in a really unique, synergistic way, all the activities I do.
Yeah, no, for sure. So how did you kind of get into social media and that whole world initially?
Yeah, it's actually been almost a decade. In January, it'll actually be a decade since I launched my company. So it's sort of an industry that found me. My background is B2B sales, biz dev marketing in technology, software industries. And my unique experience is that after graduating from University of the United States, I went straight out to Japan, where I lived for 15 years. So I helped foreign companies in Asia, often launch sales operations from scratch, where they had no brand recognition. And it was really that holistic business experience, doing business in Japan, in China, Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and really navigating the waters, not just the different languages, the different cultures, the different ways of doing business, the different storytelling that you needed to do as a brand to build trust with clients. That truly holistic business experience translated well when social media was emerging. I began blogging, and I really started blogging as a networking vehicle back in 2008, focused on LinkedIn because that was my background, B2B. 2009, I wrote my first book, which was an extension of that blog, all about online networking. And I started getting invited to speak locally. And then in 2010, January, I had a number of companies reaching out to me. And what I realized back then was what companies needed was really, not necessarily an agency, but they needed education and they needed training and they needed strategy. And that's really where I focused the first several years of my, career. And it's really fairly recently, about 3 years ago, when one of my consulting clients said, "Neal, this is all great. We want to implement. We don't have the resources to implement. Can your company implement on our behalf?" So the agency side is something I was pulled into, but it's something I, enjoy doing as well. And I have an infrastructure to support that. And really, over the last few years, the emergence of influencer marketing and myself, I work with my accountant every year, break down my revenues. It was a few years ago where it's like, this is like influencer revenue that I'm starting to get from working with brands from a variety of different ways. And that's where I really began to see, and I've actually seen the acceleration of not just, brands reaching out to me to work together as an influencer, but as companies realizing the importance of working with influencers. And that's why over the last year or two, my blogging and my speaking, and obviously this upcoming book, I've really been focused on influencer marketing. And obviously I've been spending a lot of time, collaborating with Onalytica and exchanging information and ideas as well.
Yeah. So you'd say really that the thing that got you it, gave you the idea to write this book is it based just a lot on your personal experience of kind of being approached, or you think at the same time it's more and more clients asking for it and kind of trying to explore that avenue as well?
I'd say the turning point, and there are a few turning points I look at when I wrote my various books. So I wrote two books early on. My third book, which I wrote back in 2013, was called Maximize Your Social. And it's because the number one question I was getting asked was, how do we measure social media ROI? How do we create a social media strategy? So I wrote that book. A few years later, the number one question I got asked was, what are the tools that we need to succeed in social? What's sort of the technology landscape? What does that look like? What do we need? And I actually launched a series of conferences called the Social Tools Summit. Fast forward about 2 years ago, I was actually speaking in front of MBA students at USC here in Los Angeles. And normally the number one question I get asked is either, social media strategy ROI, or tell me more about the tools. But this time it was all about influencers. And it wasn't just about influencer marketing, but these business people were saying, we have friends that are making a lot of money, as an influencer. How do we get in on the action, right? And that's where it occurred to me that, that influencers as a subject, not just influencer marketing, but a lot of marketers who wanted to be influencers, is just a huge subject. And, fast forward, as I continue to speak and what have you, influencer marketing really is the topic that gets the most interest. And as I did more research for my book, I realized that it actually represents a compelling trend that I think more and more companies are going to be opening their eyes up to, because I'm a firm believer that most marketers have really been miseducated about what influencer marketing really is. So I see myself on a mission, because I think that those brands that use social media to collaborate with others are the brands that are going to win.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, we obviously feel the same way about the kind of the emergence of the industry. I think, it's interesting seeing it emerge a little bit as as internet culture is covered. You're starting to see kind of more people writing about it regularly. I'm sure you probably sometimes read Taylor Lorenz in the New York Times. She's a great example of someone starting to cover that beat. So it's growing. But I've had exactly the same experience talking to people about marketing, pretty recent marketing graduates saying they still don't know a huge amount about it. So it's kind of great you're creating, more resources for people. Because I think it's something, a lot of sort of pretty well-trained marketers otherwise are kind of behind on. So to sort of pivot slightly to, I guess, your experience, on the other side of the table, not as a brand, but as an influencer, what kind of things are you finding brands ask you for when they reach out to you?
Well, originally my focus was more on the B2B side, and my community was really focused in on, obviously, advice, marketing advice. So the initial brands that reached out to me were really more on the B2B side. And a lot of that came down to content creation. Probably one of the first times that I was hired as an influencer was really to create a resource, really to create an ebook. To co-author an ebook with a tool company that then obviously, they're tapping into an expert to help them write that content. But there's also the expectation, and a correct expectation. I'm going to share that with my network and ask people to obviously download the ebook and, provide an email address and what have you. So, and that's happened a few times since then. It's funny because that conference that I ran as well, called the Social Tool Summit, there was one tool company who said that they were able to buy a sponsorship to that summit as part of their influencer marketing budget, because they wanted to engage with my community and they saw my event as a way of doing that. So that's another example. Obviously, there are, hey, can we work together on a blog post? We're doing an event. Can you help us promote it? Will you speak at our event? Will you join us for a webinar? So on the B2B side, it often comes down to, number one, content centricity. And number two, really event, speaking at an event, or just covering an event, promoting an event. Those seem to be the key areas. But what's also interesting is that because I have a network of business people to a lot of consumer brands, that is exciting thing to tap into as well. So over the last few years, especially because I'm very active on Instagram and I've built up a large following there, is the consumer brands that want to tap into that, right? So for them, it is more of, obviously posting creative content on visual social networks, promoting the brand, obviously in a sponsored ad type of way. We're really tapping into the business person that is following, me or joining my community. So it's been a wide range. Obviously, affiliate marketing is another way that brands want to work with me. I don't consider myself an affiliate marketer, so for me, I'm not that interested in it. Obviously, it's, hey, we'll give you something for free. Will you post about it? And, if it's something that I think would help my clients, maybe. But I really, at number one, does it add value, right? That's going to be, I'm not going to waste my time trying to use something that I have no use for. And I'm very upfront with brands about that. So like I said, it's really a variety of things. And I think that part of what I'm talking about here, like getting people to try something or a blog post or, whatever it is, affiliate marketing, are things that companies have been doing for a while. But when you think about it, affiliates are influencers. They have networks that brands want to tap into. So when you sort of redefine influencer marketing around those lines, it comes down to content creators are inherently influencers, no matter how big or small they are. They are publishing content. They are reaching people. They are building community. So a lot of things that brands and businesses have been doing for the last decade have already been components of influencer marketing, even though they probably haven't realized it. So what I teach and what I'm writing about is let's formalize that, right? Let's now put a budget behind that. So you have an organic social budget, you have a paid social budget. Now we need a budget for our influencer program, and we're going to measure it. And there's a lot of different ways we can collaborate, but everything we do, a Google ad, a Facebook ad, it's up today, it's gone tomorrow, but relationships last forever, right? And when you convert influencers into brand advocates, it's tremendous ROI. And that's where we get down to the concept of collaboration, and this is why when I talk with Tim, Tim Williams and Onalytica, we're obviously in firm agreement that it's not a one night stand. It's a marriage, it's a long-term relationship, and there's benefits for both parties because brands have a lot to offer, not just monetary, experiential, and what have you. And every influencer is different. Everybody wants something different. And if I'm contacting someone on behalf of a brand and all they want is money, I'm sort of going to take a step back. And, the influencers are not programmable ad units, nor should they be. And if someone is acting that way, I sort of question, in other words, if they're going to become an ad unit for any and every brand that they'd work with, there's probably going to be little value for your company working together with them. And it's not going to be a long-term relationship. So I think that a lot of the issues, and I know that this is a very, very long answer, but I think a lot of the issues that the industry's been working with, I do think over time, as brands get a little bit smarter and they reach out to people that are more authentic, in the micro nano level, I think a lot of the issues that we've been having that you hear about, I think they're all going to be ironed out. And I think the industry is going to mature very, very quickly over the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. I think like quite an interesting element of what you're talking about is, I think at the minute we distinguish a lot. We sort of categorize between B2C and B2B. And I think what we might start to see, we called our ebook industry and B2B. I sort of wonder if we'll hope, well, this is kind of my 2 cents. I almost wonder if we're going to go almost industry versus product focused influencer marketing. And as you say, that very sort of transactional one-off thing might start to fade away a little bit. And we're going to see, the brands, because I think there's loads of really cool brands in the B2C space who are thinking that way, who are thinking, how can we create industry content? How can we educate our customers? How can we, provide insight into things they're really excited by? I think hopefully we're going to see kind of that emerge. So glad to kind of hear you're in agreement. So
yeah, I just want to say for B2C, for educational content, I think that there is so much potential there for consumer brands and to work with influencers on that. So, I talk about B2B influencer marketing being content centric. Well, B2C brands, and I don't want to be rude, but a lot of them are just not good at creating content for social media, right? You go through the Instagram feed and you can see the ads, whereas influencers they're inherently content creators. They create good content. So in terms of educating educating the world, the industry about your product, there's no better people to collaborate with than influencers to get a fresh perspective and really, create what we call audience-centered content, right? Content that would seem natural to people to consume versus coming from the brand.
Yeah, we've probably touched on about 4 or 5 answers to this next question already, but I'm going to make you choose one. If you could change one thing about the influencer marketing industry, what do you think you would pick?
Yeah, it's that transactional, using people as programmable ad units is the thing that I would want to obviously eradicate from the entire industry. It's this notion that I'm gonna toss a $25 Amazon gift card your way, and you're gonna do this for me.
And you're gonna do it exactly how I say.
Yeah, and it's like, well, what is the value of $25? What is the value of $25 to that brand versus what is the value of that $25 to an influencer? So I'm actually on, another mission. I want to educate the industry, but I also want to educate influencers as to their worth. Not the people asking $100,000 for an Instagram post, but the people that are providing real value above and beyond a $25 Amazon gift card. That should probably be compensated a little bit more for what they're providing. So yeah, there's so much to fix in the industry, but definitely that transactional programmable ad unit, that has to go. Really has to be about relationships. And companies, they still may see some value in doing that, and we're always going to have these marketplaces, what have you. It's for small businesses that don't know better, it's a convenience factor, and they're going to do it. I just don't think they're going to be as nearly as effective as they could be, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm in complete agreement with you there. We kind of we touched earlier on the topic of tools. Kind of in your experience, do you think we're going to see more? Well, I mean, there's already been a big influx of tools into this space, but I think particularly for the relationship management, do you see kind of more of a use case growing for that as companies are trying to not just do these one-off influencer engagements, as they're trying to scale it globally and across business units? Do you think there's going to be more of a use case? Do you think there's more maturity needed from the market before more of those grow?
No, there's definitely going to be an increase in need for that type of technology. I spoke earlier this year at Social Media Marketing World and Influencer Marketing, and I specifically did not bring up technology. In part of my re-educating the industry, I don't want people to think that there's a tool that's going to help all, right? What you need to have like an analog understanding of the issues, and you need to be able to have an analog perspective no matter what tool you use, even Onalytica, right? I would still want whoever's in charge of the program to manually visit a profile, visit a blog, and vet this person from a cultural perspective, from a brand perspective, what have you. So I think that number one, that's critical, right? But once you get that, and once it's like, okay, I want to identify influencers. If I was going to identify influencers, I would do it this way. And then work with a company like Onalytica that's built, that's spent hundreds of man years developing an algorithm to best find those influencers, right? So you need technology for influencer identification, obviously. You need technology to monitor your program for the ROI to get budget. And you definitely need technology to manage those relationships, because you want to know whenever they talk about you, you want to know you're going to be reaching out to a lot of people, and maybe only a fraction of them are going to get back to you. But you need to be able to manage and monitor on a long term, how are your relationships with all these influencers? It's not a CRM, right? We're not making sales. These aren't customers. These are collaborators, and it requires obviously the need to tap into social, but also to be able to understand that relationship pipeline with influencers. It's going to be very, very different than a pipeline would be from sales. So I think it does require unique technology that's still emerging on the influencer relationship management side. And I think it's going to require a lot of AI, a lot of machine learning to really vet out the fake influencers that are costing the industry a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something we've dedicated a lot of time to, trying to figure out, what does genuine influence look like? And there's always going to be people who are sort of trying to figure out, what the algorithms are and almost get ahead of it. But that's definitely where, as you say, that really advanced tech comes into it. So just finally, I wanted to sort of circle back to the B2B use case specifically, and I'm kind of interested to hear where you think that particular, that type of business is going, because it was kind of interesting that you said you started out talking about that business of almost just online networking. Do you think that your kind of background in that, I guess you've seen it come all the way, and now we're sort of back to using this tool this tactic that we call influencer marketing, that's seen as very B2C, and yet actually it's kind of, do you think it's in some ways nothing new under the sun, like it's the same stuff you were talking about 10 years ago, or does it feel like it's evolved?
Well, it's obviously very different, because we've had the democratization of how content's published, how it's consumed, and really the democratization of media influence, right? So, I don't know how old you are, but my kids will talk about the people that influence them, that are YouTubers or Instagrammers that a lot of people my age have never heard of. And that is just unheard of. I mean, when I was growing up, we all knew the same people. They were all celebrities on TV, in the movies. So this is the democratization of media influence. This is how it works, right? So people are influencing other people, and it's all random. Everyone's going to be influenced by different people, and a lot of those people are through social media. So
Yeah.
that is just significantly different. But what is the same in terms of B2B? So B2B is all about organizational, of trying to influence organizations. And often, at least in the industry I worked with, we always had ecosystem partners. So, I worked with a semiconductor company that maybe had ecosystem partners that were PCB manufacturers, or I worked with a software company and the ecosystem partners were system integrators. Sometimes they were semiconductor manufacturers. So you always had this notion that you had partners. And for many companies, it's value-added resellers, VARs, right? Or maybe they're distributors. So you always have referral partners. You always have ecosystem partners, companies that you need to work together with in order to make your clients successful. And as long as that is still the case, which I do believe it is in many B2B industries, that is where the role of influence has always been there, right? These were companies or people within companies that had influence that you wanted to tap into. Now, some of those might be influential online, some may not be. But if they're influential online, then these become, prime targets to include as part of your influencer marketing program, not just tech bloggers and Instagrammers and YouTubers, what have you, but looking at partners, obviously looking at employees as well. And that's a whole different issue altogether. But, the
maybe for the next book.
What's that?
Maybe for the next book.
Oh no, I have a chapter on the employee as influencer in this upcoming book because it's a important chapter. But yeah, so there's a lot of areas. The question from an influencer marketing perspective is how much influence do these entities have in digital media online? So not everybody is going to understand it. And B2B in general has been a little bit late with social media marketing, with digital marketing, and with influencer marketing. But I'm sure that there are going to be some entities, some people that you can work with. And it's really a prime opportunity to claim your space and develop these relationships earlier rather than later. Because, if the influencer is really authentic, they're not going to want to work with competitors once they have a really, really good relationship with one company that's been really good to them for long term, because it is a marriage, right? So that's why you're never too late, but you really, once you realize the potential, my recommendation is you really want to start moving fast and lock in those relationships with the right people.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we're definitely. I think we're seeing the same thing. We're kind of excited as that opportunity really starts to grow. That's what we've seen over the last 18 months. So that was all the questions I had. The last thing I maybe wanted to do is just ask when we can all get our hands on the new book.
Yeah, so it's coming out in March of 2020. It's being published by HarperCollins, so they're a global publisher. When I was in London recently, I did look on Amazon UK, and it had a publishing date of April instead of March. So I don't know why that is, but anyway, it is available for pre-order. And I'm really excited about it and can't wait to share it with the world.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Excited to read it. So Neal, thanks very much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll see you out on the conference circuit as well soon.
I'm looking forward to it.